On an analog board like this, if you're running, you've got all your returns coming on these faders, and then you start running a bunch of parallel compression, that's going to increase your gain a lot, right? So the whole mix is going to get louder. And so for myself, I would typically be bashing the console pretty hard. And there are some artists that I've worked with over the years who have come into the room and seen all the meters being pinned and kind of would freak out a little bit. For the longest time, I thought it was that I was just a shitty mixer, and that it was because I didn't know how to gain stage properly that my mix bus was always pinned. So I would, pull the faders down and then start again and try to get a balance that seemed healthy. And then eventually you sort of go in your work state and you kind of forget what, you're not looking at meters anymore, making it sound good. And then I look and the meters would be pinned every fucking time. And eventually I just realized that's the way I like it. I just think it sounds that good. So when I would print to the half-inch tape, the inputs to the half-inch tape would be manually turned down, usually about 6 or 7 dB, because otherwise I'm just slamming the shit out of it. I did mix on an SSL-J for a long time, and the SSL-J is unflinching about overloading. The channels on this board, if I hit play and the kick drum, channel 1, you're seeing a little bit of red there. This console does not care about that at all. It sounds fine. The SSL-J, if that channel is flashing red because it's clipping, it sounds like a digital distortion. It's a very difficult console to mix on. I think a lot of people hated it for that reason. And then the same thing, red meant red on the mix bus. I would still smash the mix bus on the SSL-J, but you had to be a lot more cognizant of not destroying the console because the SSL-J is DC coupled and it has a completely different gain structure. It's just a lot less forgiving when it comes to levels. But this kind of SSL, or I did a lot of mixing on old Neve consoles, it would be the same thing every time. Every time it sounded good to me, the meters would be getting smashed. And so eventually, like with some clients, I would put tape on all the meters so that they wouldn't freak out. And then I would just turn down the input to the tape machine or whatever it is. And so everything looked fine so long as they weren't looking up here. And that actually happened with Dave Grohl. He came in when I was mixing that song, The Pretender. And he came in and he was like kind of freaking out because he saw how all the meters were pinned. And he was like, "Is everything okay in here?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I mean, look at what's going on." I'm like, "Does it sound good?" He's like, "Yeah, it sounds good, but is that right? Is that okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, it's cool." And I just got tape and I put it on all the compressors and everything so that you're just mixing with your ears and not your eyes. And so obviously you're getting some kind of saturation and you're losing headroom when you do that. But sometimes it just sounds good. And I think that's the only thing that really matters when you're making records is what sounds good. Hence the level of commitment instead of trying to fix it later. So yeah, with these things, the gain staging is something you want to keep an eye on, but I never really developed proper gain staging techniques, unlike, smarter mixers. So yeah, the meters would be pinned a lot. I can't remember how badly these meters were getting smashed when we mixed it, but again, the tape machine was always set for -6 or -7. There have been songs that I've printed that were still too hot to the tape machine at -6 or -7, so you turn it down even further. And there are some songs that get printed with a -10. You turn down the input to the ATR to -10 so that you're not pinning, because you don't want to hit the tape that hard when you're printing to tape. I can't remember exactly. I felt really guilty if I'm turning down the tape machine to -10. I felt like a failure, something's going wrong, but it was sounding good and we printed it like that. So yeah, I mean, with these boards you can clip them and they sound good, and that's something that a lot of people do with these SSLs. I'm not doing that much stuff on the board here because the idea was, again, to try to get it sounding good on the way in. So the things I'd probably be doing would be adding a little bit more EQ to the vocal. We can add some compression to these backing vocals actually to make them stick through a little bit more. So we have the Veramue on bus 5 and 6. We're going to add that here. So right away you're getting more personality. I want more intelligibility, more consonants popping through. So we're going to turn on these channel compressors. Always risky on the board that's 30, 40 years old if these channel compressors are going to work. Let's see. We're at Mix of the Masters. It's got to be good. So to me, right away, the counterpoint, the backing vocal group has a lot more articulation now. So again, the vocal's kind of dry, not real loud, because you just don't want a loud vocal in this. So this drum balance, you can tell there's still a person in there playing drums, but it doesn't sound like it. You can't really hear what Dom is playing that well. It's just kind of supporting role. And we'd probably turn him up a little bit. So you can just make out his acoustic snare drum in that drum package. So the vocoder break, again, I'll probably add a little bit of channel compression to it for the same reason. I just want it to cut through, in the consonants to cut through a little bit more. I don't necessarily want to EQ it that much because we got it sounding pretty good on the way in. But let's add a little bit of EQ, roll out some bottom end, and see what that sounds like. So right away that sounds more articulate. And that's mostly it. I mean, for the guitar solo, it's not really worth discussing. There's nothing to do to it. It's just, it is what it is. I mean, you probably compress it a little somewhere, but all right, yeah, we should probably compress a little because you can't hear a lot of the notes. And then also we'll set so these guitars are going to, whatever it is over there, the TG1, we'll send the guitar solo to the TG1 also. I will say that the final version of the song was mixed. We submixed everything. We printed the mix and then did stems. This guitar solo I imported from the stem session. This wasn't in the first mix. So the multi-track we're working from is the first version of this. I think there's also a ride cymbal that we added during the second mix session that I don't have in here. So, and that astute listeners astute fans of the song might notice that in the guitar solo section in particular, and maybe from there to the out, I think there's a ride cymbal that we don't have right now. So what we're listening to is, when we first went to mix this song, this was what we thought was done. As soon as you added the solo, there's kind of a trick about guitar solos is, and this works no matter what the band is, or the artist or whatever, if there's a guitar solo, you always turn up the cymbals. And so as soon as we put this guitar solo in, there wasn't any cymbals, so we would have put some. I don't know where we would have got one at the time because we didn't have any gear at the studio, but I don't know. I don't think we would have just sampled one and thrown it in. So I'd have to go back and listen to the final version, but I think there's faintly a ride cymbal during this section. Could be wrong, but listening to it now, I would want to put a ride cymbal in there. And so in this last chorus, you've got the sort of stuttery vocals. I think that those sort of came up louder on the second repeat, but right now they're just sort of in the whole way. I mean, that's pretty much it. It's when I'm mixing a record that I've also produced, the mixing process tends to be an extension of the production process. So if I'm mixing something that someone else has produced, I'm mixing, they've got it nailed, do not touch anything, you're just gonna execute and make the mix awesome for them. But if it's something that I'm involved with the production, you know that at any point you can make big changes. Changes like adding a solo, changes like adding a ride cymbal. There might have even been other things that happened during the stem mix which I think happened probably a week after this. So what we would have done is we would have taken this, printed it onto 1/2 inch, because that's what we were doing at the time. And we also print it back into the computer. In fact, I had an entire separate rig that was just for printing mixes. And then we would have printed stems at the studio. And then I think we went on to work on some other songs and then came back to this and we brought up all the stems. Actually, the SSL at Townhouse was winged, and we would bring up the stems on one of the wings so as not to affect what was going on over here, and do the submix, remix the song, not remix. Stems are basically submixes of the drums, the bass, guitar, etc. And we would have brought those stereo over on some small faders, which are a bit cleaner sounding, and then added in the solo, maybe a ride cymbal, maybe something else, I don't know, to just finish the song again. So that's the process. So like, yeah, when you're mixing something that you were also had a hand in the production, you can make changes at the last minute. And with a song like this that's kind of weird, you're still figuring it out the whole time. So figuring it out even until the last possible second. So you'd work from stems in those cases to be able to make those kind of changes at the last possible minute. Obviously, we could have just pulled up the whole multitrack again and just added changes to the multitrack, but recalls don't always come back perfectly. It was obviously just a much easier way to work off of the stems. Incidentally, we have done that on other Muse tracks. There's a song off of the album Drones called Dead Inside, where the final mix of it was done off of stems, but that's mostly because we were at Air Studios and I just love the vintage Neve they have there. So we took the stems that we made on an SSL and I pulled them up on the vintage Neve and did some broad stroke tweaks. So if that song sounds different to the other ones on the album, that would be why. We had to mix what we thought it was done, printed versions to 1/2 inch tape and into the computer, and then you print stems partly for delivery methods and whatnot. So at any rate, so when you're printing stems, there's a lot of different ways that people choose to do it. Your mix on the console or in the computer or whatever is going through stereo processing at the end of it. Most of the time when you're printing stems, you want to not use that processor so that you can recall the mix using the stems and have it sound the same. So in the case of this song, we would have had the song mixed on the console, going through the SSL compressor, going through the GML EQ, the curve bender, and the EAR 660 compressor to generate this kind of sound. When you're printing the stems, you take all that off and just print stereo drums, stereo guitars, bass, etc. And then, so that way if you need to pull the mix up again, you can just pull up all those stereo submixes. They're gonna be at the same nominal level that you were on the console, and then you can put the mix bus stuff back in and it should sound pretty much exactly like where you left off with the mix. You also have some freedom later down the road if you need to work on the song again. There is another way that you can print stems, which a lot of people do, and you actually, if you're mostly using the SSL compressor or some other compressor as the sidechain input, you can sidechain your compressor and go through the EQs. And what I mean by sidechain, I mean that you would take essentially the printed mix, the printed non-compressed mix, you would print a version without the compressor, and then you feed that back into the sidechain while you're printing the mix. And that way the compressor's reacting the same, like the whole mix is hitting it, even though you might only just have the hands going. Because when the whole mix is playing, that compressor is going to be getting whacked. But if you're only playing the hand percussion, it's not going to move. But if you're printing stems and you want them to come back and sound just like the mix is done perfectly, then you sidechain the mix compressor, get that thing moving based off of a non-compressed mix, and print all your stems, and then you have them in the computer and it'll sound pretty much like the exact mix. Back then we wouldn't have done that. We would have taken all this off, printed stems that are just clean with no mix chain on it, and that way we could put them back up on the board, engage the mix chain, and tweak the mix from there. All right, so that's Supermassive Black Hole. The track is almost 20 years now. That's about 20 years old, I guess. And I had super fun pulling this up. I don't think I've gone through this track since then. And there are a couple things that really struck me about the production of it in particular, is how handmade the song was and how much effort we went into doing something that I can't tell, like that snare drum is so bad sounding that it's not, I doubt we pulled it up and any of us said, oh my God, that's perfect. That's the perfect snare sound. It was almost like we got there in a period of rejecting things that were normal. And then in the context of the song, that sounded good, I guess. I mean, it sounded good enough to leave it in. And so we put this thing together however we wanted to and didn't really expect, I mean, I think we thought people might like it because the song is so good and Matt's vocal is so good and Everything the band did was like really unique and felt fresh for them. But I mean, to see the kind of life the song has had now and the multi-generations that still to them it feels like a new song, that's kind of insane and definitely not anything we would have ever imagined happening. The song is now one of the biggest, if not the biggest song in their catalog, which is also insane because their catalog is amazing. I'm not sure why that is the case, but you know, I feel like going through and looking at this and trying to put the song in some kind of contemporary context, it just feels like, you know, maybe there's some value in doing something that feels out of step and handmade, because if you do something that's like really zeitgeisty, you know, it's going to feel really zeitgeisty in that moment. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Come to think of it, you know, there are lots of songs that were zeitgeisty in the 80s that sound super cool now. So I don't know. I mean, I guess there isn't any moral of the story here. You just do what you want. Just do what you like. And we just got lucky in the case of this song, in that, like, I think partly from some movie syncs and whatnot, the songs just kind of really lasted. And yeah, so anyway, that's Supermassive Black Hole from the album Black Holes and Revelations from Muse. I co-produced this album with the band and mixed it. And yeah, it's been really fun to open it up and have a look at it and go through it with you.